Hello team players! I'm back with another archetype video, and today we're talking about the Clawdancer Archetype. Let's dive in. So the Clawdancer dedication gives you two stances, both of which require you to use specific unarmed attacks. With Claw stance, the only strikes you can make are frenzied claw attacks. These deal 1d6 slashing damage and have the agile, finesse, grapple, unarmed, and versatile piercing traits. With Talon stance, the only strikes you can make are sweeping talon attacks, which utilize the claws on your feet. These deal 1d8 slashing damage and have the finesse, sweep, and unarmed traits. You also don't need a free hand to use spinning talon strikes. Overall, Claw stance is really good for single targets, especially if you have enough strength to make athletics worth it, since that grapple trait allows you to use your item bonus on your hand rapid mighty blow. Talon stance is clearly built for hitting multiple enemies at once, as we'll see with some of the feats that you can take later if you have this dedication. But honestly, not a huge fan of Talon stance, mainly because all of its traits on that strike are meant to do extra damage. Finesse lets you use your dex instead of your strength, so it's easier to hit, even for dex-based characters. Sweep allows you to gain a bonus on your attack roll if you hit multiple targets in the same round. And well, it's an unarmed strike, so of course it has the unarmed trait. Luckily, a lot of feats in this archetype let you switch stances and do something else, meaning you really don't need something like Master of Many Styles to switch stances when your turn begins. You might still want opening stance, just so you can immediately go into Claw stance or Talon stance at the beginning of combat, but you really don't need anything else. Alright, for feats you can take at level 4, we're going to start with Claw Snag. Essentially, if you have an enemy grabbed or restrained and they try to escape from you, you shift into Claw stance if you weren't already, and get to make a frenzied claw strike against the target. In other words, if you have a creature grabbed or restrained, this punishes them for trying to escape. In other words, this gives enemies more of an incentive to attack you rather than escaping. Honestly, I do like this feat, but I think it has some problems. More than likely, you're going to want your enemy to waste actions trying to escape from you. So punishing them for doing that might not be something you want to do, especially with most characters that will want to play this archetype, as they'll want to be dex-based characters. So they won't be able to wear the heavy armor that would make this feat worth it. Although I guess it would be interesting to see this archetype used with a class that wants to wear heavy armor, but I still think this won't be very good with most characters that are going to want to take this archetype. Dashing Pounce requires 2 actions. If you are in Claw stance and have 2 open hands, you can leap, and if you end your movement next to an enemy, you can make 2 frenzied claw strikes against them. Your multiple attack penalty applies to these strikes as normal. If both these strikes miss, however, you fall prone at the end of your leap. This is good action economy, definitely, because you get to move and you get to make 2 strikes for 2 actions. But remember that leaping is a move action, which means it does provoke reaction. The downside of falling prone at the end of your leap if both strikes miss is probably not going to happen too often. In my experience, most of the time, the first or second attack will hit. But there is a feat in this archetype later on that basically gets rid of this entire downside. Overall, this one can be good in the right build, but only in the right build. If you're any other build, you're probably not gonna want to pick up this. And the last feat for level 4 is Talon Sweep. You can use this reaction when an enemy tries to strike you while it's flanking you. You shift into Talon stance if you weren't already. If the triggering strike misses, then you can make a spinning Talon strike against any creature that is flanking you. This is a good way of turning the tables on enemies that are trying to flank you. And this would be at your full attack bonus since it is a reaction. But at the end of the day, this is just damage, and they have to miss you in order to even do the strike. Otherwise, this is just shifting to Talon stance as a reaction, which honestly isn't bad, especially if you've got a lot of enemies around you. With Obsidian Shards, If your last strike was from one of your stances you gained from this archetype, you can break off a piece of it in your target. Doing so deals 1d6 persistent bleed damage. This persistent bleed damage is 2d6 if your unarmed attacks deal 3 dice worth of damage, and 3d6 if they deal 4. Honestly, this in combination with grabbing the enemy would be pretty good, especially if you can get that restrained condition. As long as they're grabbed or restrained, they're not going anywhere, and they're taking bleed damage every single turn. But this by itself doesn't really help the team. It's just extra damage. But as I said, there are ways to use this in combination with other things. Moving on, we have what I consider to be the best feat in this entire archetype, Wheeling Grab. You need to be trained in acrobatics to take this. However, for one action, you can shift into Claw Stance if you weren't there already, and attempt to tumble through an enemy space. If you successfully move through an enemy space, you can grapple them. Keep in mind, this does not say you can attempt to grapple them. Yeah, that's right. You get to grapple them for free if you're successful on your acrobatics check. Not only is this 3 actions for 1 action, as you're going into Claw Stance, you're tumbling through, and you're grappling them without even making an athletics check, but this also means that Clawdancers don't even have to be trained in athletics to grapple people, which is insane. Granted, you do have to be good at acrobatics to use this. But for the first time ever, Dex-based characters can grapple people without much of a problem at all. This is by far at least one of the best feats in this archetype. Then we've got Hindquarters Kick. If you're in Claw Stance and have a creature grabbed, you can spend 1 action to shift into Talon Stance and make 2 spinning Talon strikes against the grabbed creature. Multiple attack penalty applies normally. In addition, after you make these 2 attacks, you release the grabbed creature. I'm not a huge fan of this feat, mainly because you have to let go of the grabbed creature. While this is good action economy, as you're getting 3 actions for 1 action, I would much rather keep my opponent grabbed than use this feat. About the only way I see this feat being good is if you know that 2 attacks are going to knock out the creature you have grabbed. Which honestly, if you have a good GM, you're never going to know, for sure. Get rid of that last line on the text and I will take this feat every single time. Because it's ridiculous action economy. The other problem is that you have to have an opponent grabbed to even use this, which makes this less than ideal as well. I don't recommend this feat. Spinning Stand, on the other hand, is honestly pretty good, especially in combination with that Dashing Pounce level 4 feat. You can spend 1 or 2 actions on this feat. If you're prone, you can enter Talon Stance if you weren't already in it, and make a spinning talon strike against any creature that is within your reach. Then you can stand. You don't take the -2 penalty for attacking while prone, and standing up with this feat does not trigger reactions. If you spend 2 actions on this feat, you can make 2 spinning talon strikes. However, each of these strikes must be against different targets. This is flat out insane action economy. Think about it. You're entering a stance, if you're not already, making a strike, and standing for 1 action. With this feat, you are essentially getting 2 free actions. Sadly, you do have to be prone to use this. And most people that take this archetype are going to have good dexterity, which means high reflex save. But there's always a chance an enemy happens to trip you. And remember, that Dancing Pounce, if you miss both strikes, you land prone. So this feat is a fantastic combo with that one, as it pretty much gets rid of the big downside of that feat. Moving on, we now have 2 level 8 feats to talk about, starting with Tear Tendons. If you're in Claw Stance and have 2 hands free, you can spend 2 actions to make 2 Frenzy Claw strikes. If you hit with both, the target must make a Fortitude save against your class DC. Should it fail, it's enfeebled 2 for 1 round. Should it critically fail, it's enfeebled 2 for 1 minute. This is another fantastic one, especially since most likely, if you're taking this archetype, you're going to be Dex-based. And Strength-based enemies may give you some trouble. And this is pretty much a screw you to strength-based enemies. Although, sadly, it does require a fortitude save, which a lot of strength-based enemies have high fortitude save. But still, Enfeeble 2 for a round on a failure is still pretty good. I do recommend this feat for this archetype. The other feat you can gain at level 8 is Feline Dance, which requires that you are a catfolk. Once per hour, if you need to make a basic reflex saving throw, and you're in one of the two stances that you gained from this archetype, you can use a reaction to roll that saving throw twice and take the better results. Then you shift into the stance you weren't in. Again, I do believe that most people that take this archetype are going to be dex-based, which means high reflex saves. So this feat isn't the best, but getting advantage on anything is extremely rare in this system, so it is still good. And you do get to shift stances as part of this, so yeah, still pretty good. Hunting Snag is effectively reactive strike, except that it only works on move actions. You can only make claw or talon strikes with it, and if you hit and the target moved out of a square adjacent to you, you can step into that square. So it's a more limited version of reactive strike. But in certain builds, this can be useful. What I can think of right off the bat is a Flurry Ranger, as your class DC will be high as Ranger, and you'll be hitting a lot because Flurry. So yeah, this will be good in certain builds. And then we have Springboard. If your last action was a successful spinning talon strike, you can use one action to leap. This does not trigger reactions from the enemy that you struck. If you land within melee reach of an enemy, you can make another spinning talon strike against them. Again, fantastic action economy here. And it lets you move without triggering reactions from one enemy, which is pretty important in some situations. I do recommend this one as well. Alright, now let's talk about Claw and Talon Flow. If you're in Claw or Talon stance, you can spend one action to make the unarmed attack associated with the stance you're in. You can then switch to the other stance that you're not in. Again, just about every feat in this archetype has great action economy. And then we come to Precise Hooks. This effectively allows you to apply an extra critical specialization effect to your claw or talon strikes. If you don't know, these strikes are in the brawling weapon group, which means their normal critical specialization effect is slow to 1, which is already flat out amazing. But this feat allows you to apply the knife critical specialization effect to critical hits while you're in claw stance, and the axe critical specialization effect to strikes in talon stance. The knife critical specialization effect allows you to inflict persistent bleed damage. So it's that in addition to the slowed 1. The axe critical specialization effect is a little confusing, but it essentially allows you to do damage as if you had hit an adjacent creature to the one you critically hit with a regular strike. But of course, that adjacent creature does still have to be within your reach. So with both of these, not only are you slowing an enemy down for a round, but you're also doing extra damage. Fantastic option here. And the last feat we currently have for this archetype is Storm of Claws. For 3 actions, if you're in either of the 2 stances you gained from this archetype, you can strike 3 times, increasing your multiple attack penalty as normal. In addition, after each strike that hits and deals damage, you can take a step action. Another fantastic feat here, as you're basically getting 6 actions for 3 actions, assuming you step after each attack. And this can allow you to hit multiple creatures with this, which is pretty freaking fantastic. And that's all the feats in this archetype. Personally, I'm a big fan of this archetype, mainly because this archetype has insane action economy. I mean, getting to do 2 or even 3 things for 1 action is pretty bonkers. This archetype with something like a Flurry Ranger or a Fighter would be absolutely insane. The build using this archetype was going to be my next video, But after going through this archetype with you guys, I have decided that I need to cover the new Ranger options first, as more than likely I'll be using some of those in that belt. So you guys can definitely look forward to that. But if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like and do all that other YouTube stuff. And if you want my videos early, you can become a member of this channel or join me on my Patreon page. Links are in the description. But if you're more interested in the Swarm Keeper archetype, you can check out this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, teamwork is vital. It helps to solve problems.